Here with more details is John Hanna, Senior Counselor for the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. John, it's a pleasure to have you. Before we get, some people were saying that this, in fact, there was speculation that it may have been a fake coup, or a way for Erdogan to sort of cite this as an excuse to seize more control for himself, centralize more power. Is there any merit to that accusation?
Well, I tend not to believe it, Dana, but it's easy to see why that kind of conspiracy theory has taken hold when you look at just how inept and incompetent this coup actually was. It really does make you wonder. These guys violated a lot of the first basic principles of successful coup making. And remember, this is a military that's actually had some experience with coups.
Where did they go wrong? Besides failing.
All, right. The first thing you've got to do is actually seize the leaders, right? You need that head of state. You need the prime minister. You need to seize all the TV stations. Both Erdogan and his prime minister were able, even though it was through FaceTime, to get on air on national TV and call their supporters into the street. And once those people answered, and he does have supporters in the tens of thousands, they were going to overwhelm those poor kids in the streets who just looked incapable of doing anything. This was the gang that couldn't shoot straight.
Was the military rather divided, or because I know that there were certain generals that they were showing, they released video footage showing a number of military members that they stripped, they held in a holding cell, they were marching them into prison. There were thousands that he's arrested so far, but there was a lot of discussion as to which generals that were turning against him and which were not. What details do we know on this?
Well, we clearly know that there has certainly been a divide, that this was a faction within the military. Some people are now alleging that it was being led by a former Air Force commander, but commanders in several of Turkey's major army divisions have been arrested, as well as, frankly, the commander of the Incirlik Air Base, which is that crucial staging ground that U.S. forces have been using to launch air attacks in Syria and Iraq. That commander was also now been allegedly implicated in this coup, and what the ramifications are for the U.S. military position in Turkey remain to be seen.
This is described as more of an Islamist government, a government that has been hesitant in really aiding the United States in help with ISIS, a government that in the past has really cracked down on opposition, particularly secular opposition. So what does this spell for Turkey's future?
Oh, I think it can only be bad things. I think we probably are now witnessing, as bad as things have been for Turkish democracy, I think the light of what remains of Turkish democracy is now going to be extinguished. We're in for a very long, extended night of the long knives in Turkey. I've already seen at least 20,000 people either arrested or pushed out of their jobs. It's obvious that these guys had a very long enemies list in Erdogan's desk that they've pulled out and deployed for precisely a moment such as this, that he now wants to finish a project that's been underway for now 14 years, to put himself in total domination of Turkey's political system and move Turkey now over the edge into basically an Islamist dictatorship. If you look at what's moved these people into the streets, and they haven't left the streets since Friday night, the mosques keep calling them out. You hear a lot more of people yelling Allahu Akbar and Erdogan is the shadow of God on earth than you hear people praising the salvation of Turkish democracy. So I'm afraid we're in for a very, very tough time here, Dana.
A tough time indeed. And how does this affect membership in NATO? I mean, particularly, as you said, this could become an Islamist dictatorship. Well, I mean, it made that already.
Yeah, it's not only an Islamist dictatorship, and of course NATO is allegedly, at least in modern times, supposed to be a club of democracies. And in fact, Secretary Kerry, to his credit, today mentioned that in terms of these purges that we'll be watching closely because NATO is a club of democracies. But this, more importantly and immediately, in terms of NATO's capability, whether it's in the Middle East or vis-a-vis Russia, these purges of the Turkish military, there is now a hurricane that is going to be brought down on the head of the Turkish military, and the thought of it being able to conduct any kind of effective military operations in Syria against ISIS in support of U.S. forces, I think is completely out the window. Now we have to ask, given what the kind of evisceration of Turkish, not only military, but police forces that Erdogan is now embarked on, what is that going to mean for what we've already seen, a dramatically escalating campaign of terrorism inside of Turkey by the Islamic State and by certain Kurdish militant factions? What's going to happen now in terms of that campaign and their ability to uphold any level of stability in Turkish society? This is all very, very dark news for the United States and our interests in that part of the world at precisely a time when things have already been coming completely off the rails. To have a major NATO ally like Turkey now head in that same direction, it's very worrying.
Very worrying indeed. John Hanna with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dana.